Hi, guys. I'm John. I'm with TechIreland. TechIreland is the database of Irish tech companies, investors, multinationals that are here and what have you. And I'm delighted to be here this morning to chair this session on the Irish tech ecosystem. I've got a great panel here. I've got Anne-Marie Turley. Anne-Marie manages these startups in Enterprise Ireland, entrepreneurs and high potential startups. I've got Browne Caulfield, and Browne is an investor. He's chair of Scale Ireland, which is the representative body for scaling companies here. And he's pretty well the best networked guy I know in terms of the Irish tech scene. We've got Orla Browne, and Orla is with Dealroom, and Dealroom is the European and international database for tech startups and scale-ups, and she'll tell you a little bit about it later. And we've got Alex, and last but not least, we've got Alex Theuma. Alex is founder of SaaStock, so he's kind of our kind of host here, I guess, to some degree, but he's also has a weekly podcast called the SaaS Revolution, and it's really must-listen kind of podcast if you haven't got it on your phone. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Orla to give a little presentation about, I think it's about Ireland and European startup and tech community. Off you go.
Yes, exactly. Thanks. Hello, everybody. I'll just stand up so I can do the slides. But my name's Orla. I'm from Dealroom. Dealroom is a platform that tracks startups and venture capital globally. And John asked me to put Ireland in a little bit of a European context of where we're at in terms of startups, venture capital as an ecosystem. So zooming out a little bit. The clicker's going to work. There we go. So this is where Europe is at as a European tech ecosystem now. It's an ecosystem that's worth over $3.4 trillion, which is an enormous milestone. It's really not that long ago that people in the US saw Europe as a small frontier market in terms of startups, venture capital, innovation. Europe has fully arrived. Europe is on the map, and there are incredible companies being built all over the continent. On this chart here as well, we can also see that the redder bars here are the younger companies. So innovation and value creation is actually accelerating. Younger startups are already worth more than their predecessors. And Europe, on a global stage, is claiming an ever greater share of venture capital. So far this year, it's about 19% of global venture capital has come to Europe. And at earlier stages, that's even more. So if you're looking at kind of pre-seed to Series A, it's more like 25% of venture capital coming to Europe. Europe is catching up with the US, particularly at the very earliest stages, but in terms of unicorn creation as well, we are catching up. So where does Ireland sit amongst that? Well, Ireland punches well above its weight, maybe is the kind of headline, consistently ranking in the top 10 European ecosystems by value and by investment raised. And they've raised, Irish startups have raised over $5 billion in the last 3 years. So projected around 1.3 this year. That's kind of an annualized amount. And after a big bubble that we all saw in kind of 2021 and first half of 22, normalizing back to kind of pre-pandemic levels as with kind of the rest of the market. But as I said, in terms of punching above its weight, so Ireland is a small country, but in terms of venture capital raised per capita, ranks 4th in Europe. So behind only Estonia, Sweden, and the UK. These are like very renowned entrepreneurial nations that people kind of know about for their entrepreneurial spirit. It's pretty impressive figures. And I think one thing that I found putting these slides together that was another important milestone is that Ireland now has more unicorns at home than it has abroad. So like in the past, it used to be a little bit, if you want to raise those later rounds of investment, you kind of maybe have to move your HQ to the US or maybe to the UK. That's not the case anymore. There are, in terms of HQ and still founding location, there are more unicorns in Ireland than elsewhere. And you saw the hockey stick kind of shape of that last graph. This shows the unicorn growth of different European countries, and Ireland again right at the top there, 5.5x number of unicorns in the last 5 years, behind only Norway and Turkey. So John told me to keep it short. Yeah, a few of the particular strengths and opportunities maybe for the Irish market that maybe we can get into a little bit. I mean, we know if anyone's been down to the docks and the quays and seen just the lit up lights of all the tech corporates in Dublin, it's the envy of the rest of Europe, having all of these incredible companies and corporates on the doorstep here. Very highly educated workforce. 65% of young people in Ireland have a degree. An English-speaking workforce. That's very attractive to these corporates, but it's also a massive asset for any company that's trying to build and scale here as well. And the uniqueness as well of being an EU member while also having strong ties to the US. And the startup flywheel that's starting to happen. So the fact that the unicorns are staying here, they're nurturing talent, they're creating people who might go off and start their own company. That their capital is starting to be recycled as well. When we get exits like something like WorkVivo and Cork can be completely transformational for an ecosystem. So those are some really amazing assets. And then maybe some challenges. Access to late-stage capital can still be a challenge. Tight talent market, in part because of those tech corporates, so particularly for certain skills in tech and in startups. Employee incentives, so Index Ventures do a ranking of European countries based on how the employee stock options are treated, and Ireland's in the kind of bottom half of that, which could be kind of looked at. And exit routes as well, so capital markets and M&A opportunities. But yeah, maybe, so all of this data has come from a new startup database that we've been working on with TechIreland. So you can kind of explore all the data yourself by going to ireland.dealroom.co. But yeah, hopefully that set a little bit of the scene for the rest of the discussion.
Okay, that's really interesting. Lots of numbers there. Lots of room for hope and room for maybe attention. And Marie, you guys are probably the biggest investors in tech in Ireland. How is Enterprise Ireland supporting startups?
So I suppose we're supporting startups in three main ways. So we have the financial supports, we have the capability building, and we have the networking. So if you start off with the funding element of it, we support companies at pre-seed stage, seed stage, and we do follow on. So we're there for the entire journey from startup to scale up. And that's hugely important. I mean, if you look at the portfolio of companies that we deal with, we have over 4,000 companies in the portfolio, 2,000 of which we have equity investments in. It's working. PitchBook have actually recognised us as the #1 VC in Europe in terms of deal flow and volume. And, as I said, we're there right through from start to scale. So we provide core funding for HBAN, the Business Angel Network. So that's any angel investors that are looking to invest in companies that are looking to find investment. There's a match service there. We do that with InvestNI and Intertrade. We also support the supply of capital into the VC market as a limited partner. So the Seed and Venture Capital Fund, which ran from 2019 to 2024, there's 185 million has gone into that into 13 seed and VC companies. We also have committed investment into the Irish Innovation Seed Fund, or ISIF, with the European Investment Fund. And that's a 90 million fund, which again will help startups. So the capability piece, if you look at what we're doing throughout Ireland, throughout the regions, we work very, very closely with our colleagues in the local enterprise offices, of which there are 31. We have the business innovation centres, of which there are 4. They help companies with their business plans, preparing for investment. The LEOs work with the early stage companies, helping them get ready. The NDRC and the connection hubs there. And also, we have the third level universities as well, which we help fund to look at deep tech startups, how they can be created and spun out into companies. So, and then the other thing as well, again, going back into the very early stage, is the New Entrepreneurs Programme, which is run by 18 technological universities. And that is a huge potential pipeline for entrepreneurs in the system. And
Okay.
just going back into the networking piece, just to close off, we are so fortunate with our huge footprint of over 40 overseas networks. And the trade missions and the trade events, this is all about helping companies grow, scale, get better business. So that's what we're doing to help.
And any new developments, anything coming down the track, or any new programs?
The biggest thing that we have done recently would be the Pre-Seed Start Fund, or PSSF. So that replaces our old Competitive Start Fund. And again, going back to listening to the ecosystem, what is friendly for investors. It's de-risking it at an early stage, so it is a convertible loan note of either 50,000 or 100,000. Convertible loan note, very, very, attractive for investors. We're looking for a small amount of matching funding, 5k for 50, and it's designed to help them get to the next bridge for seed funding within 6 to 18 months.
Okay, great. Okay, so Enterprise Ireland is doing their bit. Taking it all in the round, Brian. Is Ireland a good place to start a business, to grow a SaaS business?
Absolutely, and firstly, just to say congratulations to Anna Marie and Enterprise Ireland on the Pre-Seed Start Fund. It is a great example of really good cooperation between the representative organisations like Scale Ireland and Enterprise Ireland, and that's a convertible loan note that is uncapped. So there's no valuation signal built into the convertible loan note. It's a very attractive product from the perspective of an entrepreneur looking to get started. So well done to Enterprise Ireland on that. More broadly speaking, yes, I think Ireland is a great place to start a SaaS business, and we're starting to see real scale companies come through, from the days where you had a lot of small companies maybe doing a couple of million revenue. We're now starting to see companies like Intercom, Finergo, AMCS that are kind of on unicorn valuations, and indeed Teamwork in Cork. And doing tens of millions of revenue and continuing to scale rapidly. I think Orla put her finger on a lot of the kind of the positive reasons for that in terms of access to talent. Ireland is also a very attractive place for talent from abroad to come and move to. And I think the globalization of capital markets has helped a lot as well. I mean, increasingly, if you want to raise 20 million, you can go to the international capital markets. You don't have to be in the US to access that kind of capital. And, a lot of those companies and others like Tynes and so on have been able to tap into those global capital markets. On the downside, and areas where we need to improve, we still need a stronger local capital market, because early stage capital in pretty much every successful ecosystem tends to be local. Those kind of first angel checks and first smaller VC checks. And obviously, it's great to see guys like Des Traynor, who are now investing as angels in Irish businesses. But we need to see lots more of that. And then, secondly, as both John and Orla mentioned, equity incentives. Equity incentives are hugely important to your ability, in particular, to attract that high-level talent. And that's an area where we can definitely improve.
So there've been sort of lots of numbers thrown around by Orla there. Is having good data really important for policymaking and for investing, I guess?
Absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, I don't understand how you can make good policy without good data, you know. And I think if you look at the Irish situation, the most recent figures published on EIIS investment date back to 2018, you know, and that's
the tax
incentivized angel investment product. That's a huge gap. That's a huge hole. So I think the role that TechIreland plays is enormously important in delivering that kind of data, and it enables representative organisations like Scale Ireland to go to government with a data-driven proposition, not just a we'd like, but you know, here are the facts, and
this is why,
and this is why, and this is why making this intervention makes sense for the economy, not just for specific individuals. So yeah, it's really key, and we're pleased that from a TechIreland perspective, there's an alliance with Dealroom, which will help us to do that better.
And Alex, I mean, you've got a kind of a view of the SaaS world that's broader than just Ireland. What's your... And actually, just before that, I mean, we published results there recently, first half of the year, and SaaS wasn't kind of doing as well as other business models or what have you. What's your perception of how things are going and how things are going in Ireland, if you have any views?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, in one way, obviously, I do have a good perspective of that, but also there are many more people much more qualified than me to comment on this. But I think in general, where SaaS is at the moment, like we've had a couple of like challenging years. The crazy times that we saw in 2021, you know, I think are thankfully kind of over, and it seems that the market is sort of reset to kind of like where it was in 2019. But from I think, you know, a lot of the companies and people that I've been speaking to here, they're finding this year difficult. People are not hitting targets. You know, churn is higher than ever. And like I wouldn't necessarily say morale is down. Hopefully, we're lifting them up at at SaaStock. But people are feeling the pain of not hitting their targets, and really to be a growth business this year is a real achievement if you're able to do that. So I think it's still like a little bit more sustaining, it is slightly tougher times, right? I would say in general, but there are reasons to be optimistic, and if we saw Des Trainer's talk, which was I thought sort of mind-blowing like earlier in terms of what's on the horizon, and he talks about it's day one now of AI, and with that and with SaaS and AI and cloud, the next 10, 20 years is going to be extremely bright for the industry.
Okay, great. And Orla, I suppose when you talk about, innovation and AI and what have you, I mean, where are the innovative hotspots in Europe and in Ireland, if you have actually any data on that?
We do, yeah. I mean, I think one of the great things is there's a lot of them. That's one of the unique things about Europe compared to the US, where things really are much more centralized around the Bay Area. In Europe, we've got the highest density of cities that have produced at least one unicorn of any region in the world. And I think that sometimes that's seen as a disadvantage, that we don't have kind of everything all in the same place. But actually, it shows that a successful startup can be built anywhere, and a successful startup ecosystem can be built anywhere, and that's happening, and that snowball effect can start happening. I mean, in Ireland, in a lot of places, it is often the big urban centres. So in the cities, but I was looking at where some of the biggest rounds had happened in Ireland this year, and it's not just in Dublin, but actually there have been rounds of over 35 million in Cork, in Belfast, and in Clonmel and kind of Tipperary. It's like it really doesn't have to be the bigger cities, and I think one of the other shifts we're seeing, and part of it's related to AI and a kind of shift towards deep tech, is that university centres are going to become really important, more so than even before. The influence of university spin-outs, educating universities on entrepreneurship and on how to treat talent, knowledge transfer and IP property. And universities aren't necessarily always in the bigger cities either. So I think kind of a refocusing on some of those geographies as well is kind of to come in the coming years.
Very good. And Marie, I mean, Enterprise Ireland puts a lot of your resources into third level and commercializing innovation, don't you?
We do indeed, and there's early stage funding, I suppose, for called Comms Fund. So that's really to develop the idea going forward. Again, once the company is actually beginning to spin out, typically for deep tech companies, it takes longer to get that first check in. It takes longer to get the first company just by the nature of it. So, and again, something like the Pre-Seed Start Fund steps in there quite well for funding that gap, the bridge to actually raising the seed funding, the Series A funding. So it's hugely beneficial at that stage. But yes, very, very important. Totally agree with Orla in terms of the importance of the third level and the deep tech spin-outs that we're seeing.
Because that's the difference, isn't it? University innovation tends to be deep tech, whereas there's a lot of fairly shallow tech, I guess, sort of across the rest of the space. Browne, have you got a view on where the deep tech fits into the overall picture?
I think there is a renaissance in deep tech and a renaissance in deep tech in investing generally. I think that's partly driven by climate change because, a lot of the solutions to climate issues will come from deep tech innovation. So I remember a few years ago people talking about kind of semiconductor is back. Well, semiconductor is back, but so are materials and a variety of other kind of deep tech areas. Having said that, I wouldn't be calling the death of SaaS or anything like that. I think going back to Alex's point, it has been a very tough time for not just for SaaS businesses, but for businesses more generally. I think we are starting to see the beginnings of a recovery. Global VC investment actually ticked up in Q2 of this year from a kind of a low, and not quite an all-time low, but a recent low in the first quarter of the year. And I think we'll start to see early stage recover first, because the early stage companies don't have the baggage that goes with being a Series B or C company. Series B, Series C and beyond, those companies it's going to be a little bit trickier for. Firstly, because they may not have been able to grow as quickly as they have done previously. But also because they may have raised money at very, very high valuations, which they wouldn't get now, and they're choosing naturally enough to stretch their capital and to try and give themselves time to grow into their valuations rather than being forced into a down round, which is all kind of potential negative consequences. So I think we'll start to see early stage recover first, and then it'll be a little bit longer before those kind of larger later stage rounds start to recover.
Alex, you speak to entrepreneurs all the time on your show. I mean, what stands out for you in terms of where SaaS is now, or where is it going?
Yeah, I think as what I touched on earlier in terms of there are the difficulties and the challenges, and people are open and sort of bringing those out. And I think, like Browne said, like then on the positive side, there are shoots, green shoots of optimism for 2024. I think in terms of in terms of the challenges and what people have been saying, that really like budgets have sort of like dried up a little bit this year. From the marketing side, the marketers that often we're selling to are not really buying, and they're kind of moving they've got smaller budgets to work with. They're moving things out into 2024. We've had personal experiences of that with some of the big partners, names that you recognise, that would be exhibiting here, but they've decided to kind of move everything into 2024 and put it in that P&L. You know, and these are some of the the challenges. I would say that the SaaS companies, they're just finding it much harder to sell this year. And then if you're not an essential tool, if you're a nice to have, unfortunately, you've probably been kicked out of someone's tech stack, and so you're experiencing again like higher churn as well. So that's what we're seeing. But then on the positive side, in the markets, look, we've had the first SaaS IPO for 2 years. In Klaviyo, I'd like to think it's a nice kind of indicator. And then you've got all these companies that have probably wanted to IPO, including Intercom, over the last 2 years, that are lining up and have the opportunity to do so. But actually, they also don't need to, because most of them are now, Intercom is profitable again, or for the first time, probably. And companies like Stripe, obviously Irish founders, sitting on so much cash that they're on Series probably X right now, right? That they ever go public? I mean, it might be good for them, because I understand it's a bit complicated their business now in terms of all the share structures. But they don't have to as well. They're sitting on so much money, right? So it's like whether you need to. But M&A is slightly picking up as well. It was slow, but now we're kind of seeing that pick up as well. So I think these are all like some good indicators. And I think in 2024, budgets will be a little bit bigger. So hopefully, we can sell more, and then the good times will be coming back.
How are listeners going to on your podcast? I mean, is that an indicator of confidence in the business model?
Oh, I mean, booming, like millions and millions of downloads. But no, I mean, like steady growth, we'll say. But yeah, I've been doing the podcast for 8 years now, and just for me, it's a great opportunity to, get to speak to great entrepreneurs, and investors, learn from them, but then share all those learnings with the audience. Yeah.
And do you track SaaS as a business model on Dealroom, I guess? And do you know how it's going, or have you any indications? As we've kind of discussed, everything has kind of been down in the last 18 months. But SaaS not disproportionately, basically. I think like marketplaces and e-commerce are struggling a little bit more. Anything that's more consumer focused. B2B is just generally a bit more resilient. And then where we have seen a bit more share go towards is actually like hardware and materials and atoms rather than bits. But SaaS has kind of been the middle of the three there. And I think Enterprise Ireland traditionally has always favoured B2B rather than B2C proposition. Maybe because the Irish market is so small, but that's always been the EI kind of mantra, has it?
It has, yes, but I suppose we do recognise both, and the Irish market is small, but again, looking at our overseas, that's what we're there to help them grow and scale overseas. But yeah, I mean, it obviously is the first route to market for a lot of companies.
Yeah. And Browne, I guess, as an investor, B2B is probably a safer proposition, is it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, firstly, as Anna-Marie pointed out, the Irish market is very small, so it's very difficult to kind of bootstrap a consumer-focused business from the Irish market. So I think you just haven't tended to see huge deal flow of really strong consumer businesses. And then I think fundamentally it is a bit more difficult to tell what's really going to work, what's really going to resonate with consumers. With B2B propositions, you can evaluate, is there a really strong value proposition here? And if you've got a really strong value proposition for your customer, then you're off to the races. But with consumers, it's much more about, if you like, likes than needs, and that makes it that bit less predictable, I would say. Yeah.
And do you think the Irish state supports and environmental supports kind of measure up when you compare us with other jurisdictions?
Well, I think, I can say in all honesty that in terms of kind of state business development organizations, I really do think Enterprise Ireland leads the world, I think in recent years, we've seen a lot of other countries working very hard to catch up, and we need to be very conscious of that. We need to be constantly refining the supports and developing the supports. Overall, I think Enterprise Ireland is a huge positive force in the ecosystem, and it's very important, unfortunately, throughout Europe, not just in Ireland, that the state is involved in funding startup activity. Because when you look at the US, you have very large pension funds that are active investors in venture capital, and you have huge university endowments that are extremely active investors in venture capital. In Europe, unfortunately, pension funds are largely excluded from the VC market by regulation, and we don't have those big university endowments. So we need sources of capital for the ecosystem, and that's why, fundamentally, government capital in some form or other is a hugely important part of all European ecosystems.
And does Dealroom track government versus private money, Orla?
We do track direct investments and fund-of-fund investments and grant funding as well. But I think it's a really good point, and it doesn't always just have to be as like handing out free money that a government can play a role, because it could be as a procurer and a market maker for a startup when they're at an early stage. Like the purchasing power of our governments shouldn't be underestimated as well. And I think, to what Alex was saying earlier as well about, the tougher times that we're living in at the moment, that can actually be an asset for certain ecosystems, because at the moment there is a lot more pain at the later stage, and although Ireland is, as I said, massively punching above its weight, it is relatively an earlier stage ecosystem, and there hasn't been as much pullback. Early stage investment is still strong, and actually it's a time when you can do a bit of catching up, particularly when we've now got a kind of a reset with AI, which is just going to shuffle the deck. It's like a new start for people, and it means that there's a new opportunity for startups to emerge again wherever they might be.
Yeah, TechIreland, we've got an event next week on generative AI. What amazed me was the huge interest. I think we had 150 slots, but we've now got 150 also on the waiting list. It's quite astounding. It's going to change things. Browne, how is it going to, who's making a real difference in this AI space? There's so much interest, so much going on.
So I think one of the interesting things about AI right now is there's been a huge amount of capital flowing into essentially infrastructure businesses like OpenAI, and of course Google have invested vast amounts there. I think there's an argument that some of the companies in that space don't really have a material moat. And increasingly you're seeing open source, large language models and so on coming to the fore, and I think there's a big question mark over whether those businesses have a long-term moat. So I do think there's a shift in terms of thinking as to whether actually people that are more at the application layer have more of an opportunity now. And I think that's actually quite consistent with most other tech stacks as they emerge. There's a lot of the value accrues to the people who are furthest up the stack, that can own the customer, right?
Yeah.
And that really, if you like, are solving the big customer problems. So I think huge opportunity in the area of kind of specialized applications of some of the AI technologies that are out there to solve real business problems.
And are you seeing that, Anna Marie? Are you seeing AI type businesses kind of really ramping up over this last year or so?
They're beginning to come in. Yeah, they are beginning to come in, and it's great to see. It's very early stages to see where they're going, develop their plan out. But yeah, it is great to see them coming in.
Okay, and you're prepared to write a check to encourage them.
If they're innovative, if they're willing to employ 10 or more people and have the ambition to go global.
I can see our light is flashing red here now, so we've got to wrap up. So thanks to our audience, thanks to Alex, thanks to Orla, thanks to Browne, and thanks to Anna Marie.